What would you do if you witnessed a child being humiliated in front of her entire class, only to discover she possessed a gift so extraordinary it could silence a room full of doubters? This is the story of Marcus Thompson, a widowed janitor. At Lincoln Elementary School, an 8-year-old Sophia Martinez, whose voice would change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked pavement of Lincoln Elementary School as Marcus Thompson pushed his cleaning cart through the empty hallways. At 34, Marcus had the weathered hands of someone who'd worked twice as long, each callus telling a story of long nights spent scrubbing floors and fixing broken desks. His worn flannel shirt hung loose on his thin frame, and his work boots squeaked softly against the polished linoleum with each step. Marcus had been the head janitor at Lincoln Elementary for 3 years now, ever since his wife Sarah had passed away from cancer. The job didn't pay much, barely enough to cover rent on their small apartment and put food on the table for him and his 7-year-old daughter Emma. But it came with something invaluable: health insurance and a steady schedule that allowed him to be home when Emma returned from her own school across town. The irony wasn't lost on him that he spent his days cleaning a school his own daughter couldn't attend. Emma went to Riverside Elementary, a struggling school in their neighborhood, where class sizes were large and resources were scarce. Lincoln Elementary, on the other hand, was in the affluent Maple Heights district, where parents drove luxury SUVs and children arrived with designer backpacks and the latest gadgets. As Marcus made his way to the 3rd grade hallway, he could hear the familiar sounds of children arriving for the day. Laughter echoed from the main entrance, mixed with the chatter of excited voices and the occasional stern reminder from teachers about walking, not running, in the halls. He'd grown to love these sounds over the years. They reminded him of Emma's excitement on school mornings. Though her enthusiasm had been waning lately, Emma had been struggling since her mother's death. The vibrant, outgoing little girl who used to sing Disney songs at the top of her lungs had become quiet and withdrawn. Her grades had slipped, and Marcus often found her staring out their apartment window with a sadness that broke his heart. He'd tried everything he could think of: art supplies, new books, even a small keyboard he'd found at a thrift store, but nothing seemed to bring back the spark in his daughter's eyes. Marcus was emptying trash cans in Mrs. Henderson's 3rd grade classroom when he first noticed Sophia Martinez. She was sitting alone at a desk in the back corner, her dark hair falling like a curtain around her face as she hunched over a worn notebook. While other children chatted and played before the morning bell, Sophia remained isolated. Occasionally, glancing up with large brown eyes that seemed to hold too much sadness for someone so young. Her clothes were clean but clearly second-hand: a faded purple sweater with a small hole near the hem, and jeans that were slightly too big, held up by a belt that had seen better days. Her sneakers had been white once, but now bore the scars of playground adventures and long walks. Despite her circumstances, there was something dignified about the way she carried herself, a quiet strength that reminded Marcus of his late wife. Over the following weeks, Marcus began to pay closer attention to Sophia. He learned from overheard conversations that she was new to Lincoln Elementary, having moved to Maple Heights with her grandmother after her parents had been deported back to Mexico. Her grandmother, Maria Martinez, worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and stocking shelves at a grocery store during the day, to make ends meet in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. Sophia qualified for the district's hardship transfer program, which allowed a small number of low-income students to attend schools outside their residential area. However, this also meant she was one of only a handful of children who didn't fit the typical demographic of Lincoln Elementary's student body. The contrast was stark and, unfortunately, not lost on her classmates. Marcus witnessed the subtle, cruelties that children could inflict on those who were different. He saw how Sophia was excluded from birthday party invitations that were distributed to the entire class except for her. He noticed how she ate lunch alone while other children gathered in chattering groups. He observed the way some kids wrinkled their noses when she walked by, as if poverty was something contagious. But what bothered Marcus most was how the adults seemed to enable this behavior through their own subtle biases. He'd overheard Mrs. Henderson commenting to another teacher about how challenging it was to have students from different backgrounds in her classroom. During parent-teacher conferences, he'd seen how some parents glanced disapprovingly at Sophia's grandmother, who arrived straight from her cleaning job, still wearing her work uniform. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in early November. Marcus was replacing light bulbs in the hallway when he heard raised voices coming from Mrs. Henderson's classroom. Through the partially open door, he could see a group of students gathered around Sophia's desk, led by a girl named Madison, whose mother served on the school board. "Why don't you just go back where you came from?" Madison was saying, her voice dripping with the casual cruelty that children often wielded without understanding its full impact. "My mom says people like you are taking spots away from kids who actually belong here." Sophia's face burned with embarrassment, but she didn't respond. She simply stared down at her desk, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. The other children giggled, emboldened by their leader's boldness. "I bet you can't even speak English properly," another boy chimed in. "Say something. Come on, let's hear your accent." Marcus felt his jaw tighten as he watched the scene unfold. He'd dealt with bullying before. Emma had faced her own share of mean kids. But there was something particularly cruel about the way these privileged children were targeting Sophia, for circumstances completely beyond her control. Just then, Mrs. Henderson returned to the classroom, carrying a stack of papers. She surveyed the scene with mild annoyance rather than concern. "Children, please return to your seats. We have a lot to cover before lunch." The group dispersed, but not before Madison delivered one final barb. "Maybe you should stick to jobs you're actually good at, like cleaning." "Oh, wait, that's what your family does anyway, right?" The comment hit its mark. Sophia's shoulders sagged slightly, and Marcus saw her quickly wipe away a tear before anyone else could notice. Mrs. Henderson either didn't hear the comment or chose to ignore it, busying herself with arranging papers on her desk. That afternoon, Marcus found himself thinking about Sophia during his lunch break. He sat alone in the janitor's closet that doubled as his office, eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich while reviewing the school's maintenance schedule. But his mind kept drifting to the look of defeat he'd seen in Sophia's eyes that morning. He thought about Emma and how she'd struggled with her own feelings of not belonging after her mother's death. He remembered the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, feeling different from her classmates who still had both parents. The parallel between his daughter and Sophia wasn't lost on him, and he felt a protective instinct stirring in his chest. Marcus had always been the type of person who minded his own business. His position at the school was precarious enough without getting involved in classroom drama. He was just the janitor, after all, not a teacher, not an administrator, certainly not someone whose opinion carried any weight in the complex social dynamics of elementary school hierarchies. But as he finished his sandwich and prepared to return to work, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't stand by and watch another child suffer in silence, especially when he had the power to do something about it. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The next morning, Marcus arrived at school early as usual, but instead of heading straight to his supply closet, he made a detour to the music room. Lincoln Elementary had an impressive music program, complete with a small stage and professional-grade sound equipment that Marcus maintained as part of his duties. He'd always had a good relationship with Mrs. Patricia Williams, the music teacher. She was one of the few staff members who treated him as an equal, rather than invisible help. They often chatted about their children. Her twin boys were in high school, and she always asked about Emma with genuine interest. "Morning, Marcus," Mrs. Williams said as she unlocked her classroom door. "You're here even earlier than usual today." "Good morning, Patricia. I was wondering if I could ask you about something." Marcus fidgeted with his keys, suddenly feeling foolish for what he was about to propose. "Of course, what's on your mind?" Marcus took a deep breath. "There's a little girl in Mrs. Henderson's third-grade class, Sophia Martinez. I've noticed she's having a hard time fitting in, and I was wondering, well, I know you're always looking for students to join the school choir." Mrs. Williams nodded thoughtfully. "I remember Sophia. Sweet child, very quiet. Has she expressed interest in music?" "Not exactly," Marcus admitted, "but I have a feeling about her. Sometimes kids just need an opportunity to find their voice, you know. Maybe if she had a place where she belonged, something she could be proud of." "The music." Teacher studied Marcus's face, recognizing the earnestness in his expression. In her 20 years of teaching, she'd learned to trust the instincts of people who truly cared about children, regardless of their official role in the school. "Tell you what," she said, "I'll talk to Mrs. Henderson about having Sophia visit my class during her free period. No pressure, just an invitation to explore music if she's interested." Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "Thank you, Patricia. I really appreciate this." "Don't thank me yet," she laughed. "Let's see if your instincts are right about this young lady." The following week, Sophia appeared at the music room door during her lunch period, looking uncertain and slightly overwhelmed by the instruments and equipment surrounding her. Mrs. Williams greeted her warmly, offering her a seat at the piano bench. "I hear you might be interested in music, Sophia. Is that true?" Sophia shrugged, a gesture that had become her default response to most questions. "I guess. Mrs. Henderson said I should come here instead of staying in the classroom during lunch." Mrs. Williams recognized the careful neutrality in Sophia's voice, the protective distance that hurt children often maintained to avoid further disappointment. She'd seen it countless times over the years in students who'd learned not to hope for too much. "Well, since you're here, would you like to try something? No pressure at all, just for fun." Sophia nodded hesitantly, and Mrs. Williams began with simple exercises, clapping rhythms, identifying notes on the piano, basic breathing techniques. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. To her surprise, Sophia picked up everything quickly, displaying an intuitive understanding of musical concepts that typically took students weeks to grasp. But it was when Mrs. Williams asked Sophia to hum along with a simple melody that everything changed. The moment Sophia opened her mouth, a pure, crystalline sound filled the room. Her voice was untrained, but naturally beautiful, with a quality that made Mrs. Williams stop playing and listen in amazement. "Sophia," she said softly, "that was beautiful. Have you ever sung before?" For the first time since entering the room, Sophia's guarded expression cracked slightly. "Sometimes. At home with my grandmother. She likes the old songs from Mexico." "Would you sing something for me?" "Anything you'd like." Sophia considered this for a moment, then began to sing a lullaby her grandmother had taught her. The Spanish words flowed like honey, each note perfectly placed, despite having no formal training. Mrs. Williams felt goosebumps rise on her arms as Sophia's voice soared through the small room, transforming the space into something magical. When Sophia finished, there was a moment of profound silence. Mrs. Williams realized she'd been holding her breath. "Sophia, that was absolutely extraordinary. You have a true gift." Sophia looked down at her hands, uncomfortable with the praise. She'd learned not to draw attention to herself, and compliments felt dangerous somehow. I'd like to work with you, if you're interested, Mrs. Williams continued gently. Not just in choir, but individually too. You have something very special, and with a little guidance, you could do amazing things. Over the next several weeks, Sophia began spending her lunch periods in the music room. Mrs. Williams worked with her on breathing techniques, vocal exercises, and simple songs in both English and Spanish. Sophia's confidence grew slowly but steadily, and for the first time since arriving at Lincoln Elementary, she had something to look forward to each day. Marcus watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction. During his cleaning rounds, he often heard Sophia's voice drifting from the music room, and each time it stopped him in his tracks. The girl had a gift that was undeniable, a talent that transcended the petty social hierarchies that had made her life miserable. But Marcus also knew that talent alone wouldn't be enough to change Sophia's situation. The same classmates who mocked her background and circumstances weren't likely to suddenly accept her just because she could sing. If anything, he worried that her growing confidence might make her an even bigger target for their cruelty. His concerns proved prescient as Sophia began to participate more in class, raising her hand to answer questions and speaking up during discussions. Some of her classmates grew more resentful. Madison, in particular, seemed threatened by Sophia's emerging confidence. The situation came to a head during the week before Thanksgiving break. Mrs. Henderson announced that the class would be preparing a special presentation for their parents, with each student contributing something unique, a poem, a drawing, a short speech about what they were thankful for. "Who would like to volunteer to sing a song for our presentation?" Mrs. Henderson asked. Several hands shot up immediately, including Madison's. But before anyone could be selected, Madison called out with false sweetness, "Why don't we ask Sophia? I bet she'd love to sing for us." The suggestion was delivered with such obvious malice that even Mrs. Henderson looked uncomfortable. The other children began to whisper and giggle, sensing the setup. Sophia's face flushed red. She understood perfectly what was happening. This wasn't an invitation. It was a trap designed to humiliate her in front of the entire class and their parents. I don't think that's a good idea," Sophia stammered. "Oh, come on." Madison pressed, her voice dripping with fake encouragement. "Don't be shy. I'm sure your voice is just unique." The laughter that followed was cruel and pointed. Sophia wanted nothing more than to disappear, to sink through the floor, and never face these children again. She was about to decline firmly when something unexpected happened. Marcus, who had been replacing burnt-out bulbs in the hallway fixture just outside the classroom, stepped into the doorway. He'd heard enough of the exchange to understand what was happening, and something inside him snapped. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the room, "I think that's an excellent idea." The classroom fell silent as every eye turned toward Marcus. Mrs. Henderson looked startled by the interruption, her mouth slightly agape as she processed the fact that the school janitor had just inserted himself into her lesson planning. "Excuse me, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice carrying a sharp edge of authority. "I don't believe this is an appropriate time for maintenance issues." Marcus stepped fully into the room, his cleaning supplies forgotten in the hallway. He could feel the weight of 30 pairs of eyes on him. 28 students and their teacher, all wondering what possessed the quiet janitor to speak up in the middle of class time. "I apologize for the interruption, Mrs. Henderson," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. "But I couldn't help overhearing the discussion about the Thanksgiving presentation, and I think Sophia would be perfect for singing." Madison's smirk faltered slightly. This wasn't going according to her plan. The whole point had been to embarrass Sophia by putting her on the spot, knowing she'd likely refuse or perform poorly. Having an adult actually encourages the idea of complicated things considerably. Sophia stared at Marcus in shock. She barely knew this man beyond their brief encounters in the hallways. Yet here he was, advocating for her in front of the entire class. The gesture was so unexpected, so kind, that she felt tears threatening to well up in her eyes. "Mr. Thompson," Mrs. Henderson said, her patience clearly wearing thin, "while I appreciate your enthusiasm, classroom decisions are really my responsibility. Perhaps you could finish your work and—" "I've heard Sophia sing," Marcus interrupted, a boldness entering his voice that surprised even him. "She has an incredible gift. These children, their parents, they deserve to hear what real talent sounds like." The classroom buzzed with whispered conversations. Some students looked genuinely curious now, while others, following Madison's lead, rolled their eyes and exchanged skeptical glances. Sophia felt her stomach churning as she became the unwilling center of attention. Mrs. Williams chose that moment to appear in the doorway, drawn by the unusual commotion coming from the third-grade classroom. She quickly assessed the situation. Marcus standing defiantly in the middle of the room, Mrs. Henderson looking flustered, and Sophia sitting frozen at her desk. "Is everything all right here?" Mrs. Williams asked, though she suspected she knew exactly what was happening. "Patricia," Marcus said, relief evident in his voice, "would you tell Mrs. Henderson about Sophia's voice? What can she do?" Mrs. Williams looked between Marcus and Sophia, understanding immediately what was at stake. She'd seen this scenario play out too many times. Talented children from marginalized backgrounds being set up for public humiliation by their more privileged peers. "Sophia is one of the most naturally gifted singers I've encountered in my 20 years of teaching," Mrs. Williams said firmly. "Her voice is absolutely extraordinary." The room fell quiet again, but this time the silence carried a different quality. Mrs. Henderson found herself in an awkward position. She couldn't very well dismiss the professional opinion of the school's music teacher, especially not in front of her students. Yet allowing Sophia to perform felt risky somehow, though she couldn't quite articulate why. Madison, sensing her scheme backfiring, tried a different approach. "Well, if she's so good, then she won't mind proving it right now, will she?" she said, with false sweetness. "Come on, Sophia, just a little song for the class." The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Sophia felt trapped between her natural desire to remain invisible and the growing expectation that she perform. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of her desk. "That's not fair," Marcus said, his protective instincts fully engaged now. "Sophia doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Talent shouldn't be put on display for entertainment." But Sophia surprised everyone, including herself, by slowly standing up. Something in Mrs. Williams's confident assertion, combined with Marcus's unwavering support, had ignited a spark of courage she didn't know she possessed. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice barely audible. Then, stronger, "I'll sing." Mrs. Henderson glanced at the clock, clearly torn between maintaining her schedule and managing the situation that had spiraled beyond her control. "Very well," she said reluctantly, "but just one song, and then we need to get back to our lesson." Sophia walked to the front of the classroom on unsteady legs. 28 faces stared back at her, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. She could hear Madison whispering something to her friends that caused them to snicker quietly. For a moment, Sophia stood there in complete silence, her mind blank. The familiar walls of the classroom seemed to close in around her, and she could feel her confidence evaporating like morning mist. This had been a terrible mistake. She should have stayed quiet, stayed invisible, stayed safe. Then she caught sight of Marcus, who had positioned himself near the back of the room. He gave her an encouraging nod, and something in his expression reminded Sophia of her father, the way he used to look at her when she was scared, with complete faith in her ability to overcome whatever challenge lay ahead. Sophia closed her eyes and began to sing. The song she chose was Ave Maria, a piece her grandmother had taught her years ago during long evenings in their small apartment. But Sophia sang it in her own way, her young voice carrying a maturity and depth that belied her 8 years. The Latin words flowed like liquid gold, each note perfectly pitched and filled with an emotion that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her years. The transformation in the room was immediate and profound. The whispers and fidgeting stopped entirely. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause in its steady ticking. Madison's smirk vanished, replaced by an expression of stunned disbelief. Mrs. Henderson's pen, which had been tapping impatiently against her desk, became still. Sophia's voice soared through phrases that would challenge professional singers, yet she navigated them with effortless grace. The acoustics of the classroom, never designed for musical performance, somehow seemed to enhance rather than diminish the power of her voice. It was as if the very walls were holding their breath to better hear this extraordinary sound. Mrs. Williams felt tears spring to her eyes. In all her years of teaching, she had rarely encountered raw talent of this magnitude. Sophia wasn't just singing notes. She was channeling something pure and transcendent, something that spoke directly to the human soul. Marcus watched from the back of the room, his own eyes moist with emotion. He thought about his daughter Emma, about how music had once been such a source of joy for her before grief had stolen her voice. Watching Sophia now, he felt a complex mixture of pride, hope, and determination. This girl deserved so much more than the small, cruel world that had been trying to diminish her. As Sophia reached the climactic high notes of the piece, her voice seemed to fill not just the classroom, but the entire school. In neighboring classrooms, teachers paused mid-sentence, and students turned toward the walls, wondering where that angelic sound was coming from. The principal, Dr. Robert Chen, was walking down the hallway when the music reached him. He stopped in his tracks, following the sound to its source. When Sophia finally finished, the silence that followed was unlike anything any of them had ever experienced. It wasn't the absence of sound so much as the presence of something sacred. A moment when the ordinary world had been touched by something extraordinary. The spell was broken by the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. Marcus had started the applause, and gradually, hesitantly, others joined in. Mrs. Williams was clapping enthusiastically, tears streaming down her cheeks. Even Mrs. Henderson was applauding, though she looked shaken by what she'd just witnessed. But it was the students' reactions that mattered most. Many of them were clapping genuinely now, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine amazement. A boy named Tyler, who had never spoken to Sophia before, whispered, "Wow," under his breath. Another girl, Emma Chen, no relation to the principal, was staring at Sophia with undisguised admiration. Madison, however, remained motionless in her seat, her face a mask of conflicted emotions. The plan to humiliate Sophia had backfired spectacularly, leaving Madison to confront the uncomfortable reality that she had just witnessed something beautiful from someone she had trained herself to dismiss as unworthy. That was... Mrs. Henderson began, then stopped, apparently unable to find adequate words. That was quite impressive, Sophia. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway at that moment, drawn by the music and the subsequent applause. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, "but I couldn't help but hear the most remarkable singing. Was that coming from this classroom?" "Sophia just performed for us," Mrs. Williams said, her voice still thick with emotion. "She has an absolutely extraordinary gift." The principal looked at Sophia with new interest. Like most administrators, he was always alert to opportunities that might bring positive attention to his school. "Sophia Martinez, isn't it? You're new to Lincoln Elementary this year." Sophia nodded, still somewhat dazed by what had just happened. The transition from terrified outsider to the center of positive attention was almost too much to process. "I'd very much like to discuss this with you and your family," Dr. Chen continued. "We have several opportunities for talented students, competitions, special programs, scholarships. Mrs. Williams, perhaps you could arrange a meeting?" As the adults continued their conversation, Sophia became aware of a different energy in the classroom. Her classmates were looking at her with expressions she'd never seen before, not the mockery or indifference she'd grown accustomed to, but genuine respect and curiosity. "Sophia," said a quiet voice behind her. She turned to see Emma Chen, one of the more popular girls in class, approaching hesitantly. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Where did you learn to sing like that?" For the first time since arriving at Lincoln Elementary, Sophia found herself engaged in a normal conversation with a classmate. Other children began to gather around, asking questions about her music, her background, her grandmother. The same details that had once been sources of shame, her family's immigration story, their modest living situation, her grandmother's traditional songs, were now met with genuine interest rather than ridicule. See, Marcus watched this social transformation with quiet satisfaction. He had hoped that Sophia's talent might earn her some respect, but he hadn't anticipated how completely it would shift the classroom dynamics. Children, he reflected, were often more capable of recognizing authentic beauty than adults gave them credit for. The lunch bell rang, interrupting the impromptu meet-and-greet session that had formed around Sophia. As students began filing out of the classroom, many stopped to speak with her, some offering compliments, others asking if she knew other songs, a few wondering if she might teach them some of the Spanish lyrics she'd sung. Madison was among the last to leave, and as she passed Sophia's desk, she paused. For a moment it seemed like she might say something, perhaps an apology or even a compliment. But the moment passed, and she continued toward the door without speaking. However, as she reached the hallway, Madison turned back briefly. Sophia caught her eye, and for just an instant, the mask of superiority slipped, revealing something more vulnerable underneath. Then Madison was gone, leaving Sophia to wonder what that look had meant. Mrs. Henderson began packing up her materials, her movements slightly mechanical as she processed what had just occurred in her classroom. "Sophia," she said without looking up, "that was quite a performance. Perhaps we should discuss your participation in the Thanksgiving presentation more seriously." It was as close to an apology as Sophia was likely to get from her teacher, and she accepted it gracefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. I'd like that." As the classroom emptied, Marcus lingered behind, ostensibly to finish his maintenance work, but really to check on Sophia. She was gathering her belongings slowly, still seeming somewhat stunned by the morning's events. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Sophia looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd known her, she smiled. Not the careful, guarded expression she usually wore, but a genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "I feel different," she said, searching for the right words, like maybe I don't have to be invisible anymore. Marcus felt his heart clench with emotion. He thought about his own daughter, about the invisible walls that grief had built around her, and wondered if there might be a way to help Emma find her own voice again. "You were never invisible, Sophia," he said softly. "You just needed the right moment to let people see who you really are." As Sophia left for lunch, walking with a group of classmates who were still peppering her with questions about music, Marcus began collecting his cleaning supplies. The morning had taken an unexpected turn, one that would have consequences he couldn't yet imagine. Dr. Chen reappeared in the doorway, having stayed behind to speak with Mrs. Williams. "Marcus," he said, "I understand you were instrumental in encouraging Sophia to share her talent today." Marcus straightened, suddenly worried that he might be in trouble for overstepping his bounds. "I just thought she deserved a chance to show what she could do, sir." "Well, your instincts were absolutely correct. That young lady has a gift that could take her very far indeed. I'm planning to reach out to some contacts I have in the music education world. There are scholarships, special programs, opportunities that could change her entire trajectory." The principal paused, studying Marcus with a new level of interest. "Tell me, do you have any background in music yourself? The way you recognized her talent suggests some knowledge in that area." Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same sensation he experienced whenever memories of his late wife threatened to surface. "My wife was a music teacher," he said simply, "before she got sick." Understanding flickered in Dr. Chen's eyes. "I see. Well, your wife would be proud of what you did for Sophia today. Sometimes it takes someone who understands the power of music to recognize it in others." As the principal walked away, Marcus was left alone with his thoughts and memories. Sarah would indeed have been proud, he realized. She had always believed that music was a universal language, capable of bridging any divide and healing any wound. Today, he had seen that belief validated in the most beautiful way possible. But as Marcus resumed his cleaning duties, pushing his cart down the now quiet hallway, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger. Sophia's voice had broken through more than just classroom hierarchies today. It had shattered assumptions, challenged prejudices, and opened possibilities that none of them could have imagined just hours before. The real test, Marcus knew, would come in the days and weeks ahead, as the initial excitement faded and the deeper work of change began. The drive home that evening felt different for Marcus. As he navigated the familiar streets between the affluent Maple Heights district and his own modest neighborhood, his mind kept replaying the events of the day. Sophia's voice echoed in his memory, but more than that, he couldn't forget the look of transformation on her face, from terror to triumph in the span of a single song. When he pulled into the parking lot of Sunset Gardens, the aging apartment complex he and Emma called home, Marcus noticed his daughter sitting on the front steps. She was supposed to be inside doing homework, but instead she sat hunched over a sketch pad, her dark hair falling across her face in a way that reminded him painfully of her mother. "Hey, kiddo," Marcus said as he approached, his work boots crunching on the gravel. "How was school today?" Emma looked up briefly before returning to her drawing. "Fine," she mumbled, the standard response she'd given to most questions since her mother's death. Marcus sat down beside her on the concrete steps, noting the intricate pencil drawing she was working on, a detailed sketch of a bird in flight, its wings spread wide against an empty sky. Emma had always been artistic, but her drawings had grown increasingly melancholic over the past year. "That's beautiful, Em. Is it a sparrow?" "Robin," Emma corrected without enthusiasm. "They migrate south for the winter. Lucky them." The comment stung more than Marcus cared to admit. He'd been so focused on providing for Emma's basic needs, food, shelter, healthcare, that he'd perhaps neglected the deeper wounds that still festered in her young heart. The guilt was a constant companion, whispering that he wasn't enough, that Emma needed more than a tired father who smelled of cleaning chemicals and worked nights to make ends meet. "I met someone today who reminded me of you," Marcus said carefully, "a little girl with an incredible gift who was afraid to let anyone see it." Emma's pencil paused mid-stroke. "What kind of gift?" "She can sing like an angel, but she was scared, just like—" Marcus caught himself before finishing the comparison. Emma had always been sensitive to any suggestion that she was somehow broken or in need of fixing. "Just like what?" Emma asked, her voice carrying a slight edge. "Just like anyone would be when they're different from everyone else around them," Marcus finished diplomatically. But today she found the courage to share her gift, and it changed everything. Emma set down her pencil and looked at her father directly for the first time in weeks. Did it really change everything? Or did people just pretend to like her for a while before going back to being mean? The question revealed a wisdom beyond Emma's 7 years, born from her own experiences with the fickleness of childhood friendships after her mother's death. Marcus recognized the protective cynicism that had grown around his daughter's heart like armor. "I don't know yet," Marcus admitted honestly. "But I think sometimes we have to take the risk of believing things can get better, even when we're scared they won't." That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus found himself at their small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and his laptop, researching music programs and scholarships. Dr. Chen's words about opportunities for Sophia had planted a seed of possibility, and Marcus wanted to be prepared with information when the meeting took place. What he discovered amazed him. There were dozens of programs designed to nurture young musical talent: summer camps, youth orchestras, private lesson scholarships, even full-ride programs to prestigious music schools. Many specifically sought out students from underrepresented backgrounds, recognizing that raw talent often emerged from unexpected places. As he scrolled through application requirements and audition videos, Marcus felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. These opportunities could indeed transform Sophia's life, but they would also require navigation of a world that he understood only from the outside. The thought of helping Sophia's grandmother, Maria, understand these complex systems felt daunting. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Marcus arrived at school to find Mrs. Williams waiting for him in the main office, her face animated with excitement. "Marcus, I'm so glad you're here early. I have news about Sophia that I think you'll want to hear." Dr. Chen emerged from his office holding a printed email. "Marcus, perfect timing. We've had quite an interesting morning already." "What's going on?" Marcus asked, setting down his cart. "After yesterday's performance, I reached out to Dr. Elizabeth Harper at the Metropolitan Youth Conservatory," Dr. Chen explained. "She's an old colleague of mine, and I thought she might be interested in hearing about Sophia's talent." Mrs. Williams picked up the story. "Dr. Harper wants to meet with Sophia as soon as possible. The conservatory has a new program specifically for gifted young singers from diverse backgrounds, full scholarships, private instruction, performance opportunities, the works." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. That sounds incredible. But what about her grandmother? Maria works 2 jobs just to keep them afloat. I don't know if she'd be able to transport Sophia to additional commitments. "That's the beautiful part," Dr. Chen said. "The program includes transportation assistance and even stipends for families who might face financial hardship. They understand that talent doesn't always come from privileged circumstances." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sophia and her grandmother, who had come to school early for a previously scheduled meeting about Sophia's academic progress. Maria Martinez looked tired but determined, her cleaning uniform replaced by her best dress, a simple blue garment that had seen many important occasions. When Dr. Chen explained the conservatory opportunity in both English and his halting Spanish, Maria's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to cautious hope. Sophia translated the parts her grandmother didn't understand, her own excitement growing with each detail. "Es verdad?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is real, very real," Mrs. Williams assured her. "Your granddaughter has a gift that deserves to be nurtured." Sophia looked between the adults, still processing the magnitude of what was being offered. "But what about school here? What about—" "My friends?" It was the first time she'd referred to her classmates as friends, Marcus noted, a small but significant shift from just days before. "The program is designed to supplement your regular education, not replace it," Dr. Chen explained. "You'd attend special classes on weekends and some afternoons, but you'd still be a student at Lincoln Elementary." The meeting continued for another hour, with phone calls to Dr. Harper and preliminary arrangements for Sophia's audition the following week. Throughout it all, Marcus observed the careful dance of hope and fear playing across both Sophia's and Maria's faces. This opportunity was beyond their wildest dreams, yet it also represented a step into unknown territory. As the meeting concluded and Maria headed off to her morning job, Sophia lingered behind. She approached Marcus hesitantly, still seemingly amazed that this quiet janitor had become such an advocate for her dreams. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, "why did you help me? You don't even know me very well." Marcus considered the question seriously. How could he explain the complex mix of emotions that had driven him to action? His own grief, his concerns for Emma, his memory of Sarah's belief in music's power to heal. "Sometimes we help people because we see something of ourselves in them," he said finally. "And sometimes we help because we know what it feels like to need someone to believe in us." Sophia nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Do you think I'll be good enough for the conservatory, I mean?" "Sophia, yesterday you made a room full of skeptics believe in magic. I think you'll be just fine." The rest of that week passed in a blur of excitement and preparation. Mrs. Williams worked with Sophia during every available moment, helping her prepare pieces for the conservatory audition. Word of Sophia's talent had begun to spread throughout the school, and Marcus noticed subtle but significant changes in how she was treated by both students and staff. The transformation wasn't universal or immediate. Madison and her closest friends maintained their distance, though their overt hostility had diminished considerably. But other children, perhaps inspired by Sophia's courage or simply recognizing genuine talent when they saw it, began including her in playground activities and lunch conversations. Most remarkably, Sophia herself began to change. The hunched shoulders and downward gaze that had characterized her first months at Lincoln Elementary were replaced by a more confident posture. She spoke up in class discussions, volunteered for group projects, and even laughed at jokes, a sound Marcus had never heard from her before. The evening before Sophia's conservatory audition, Marcus found himself thinking about Emma again. His daughter had seemed more engaged lately, asking questions about Sophia and even expressing interest in attending the Thanksgiving presentation where Sophia would perform. It was a small sign, but Marcus chose to view it as progress. That night, he made a decision that surprised even himself. After Emma had finished her homework, he sat down at the small keyboard he'd bought her months earlier, the one that had been gathering dust in the corner of their living room. "Remember when Mom used to play this old thing?" he asked, running his fingers over the keys. Emma looked up from her art supplies, curiosity flickering in her eyes for the first time in weeks. She said it was out of tune, but she loved it anyway. "Your mom believed that music could heal almost anything," Marcus said, pressing a few tentative keys. The sound was indeed slightly off-pitch, but it carried memories of Sarah's gentle melodies and Emma's childhood laughter. "Maybe it's time we found out if she was right." Emma approached slowly, as if the keyboard might bite her. "I don't remember how to play anymore." "That's okay. We can learn together." Father and daughter sat side by side on the small bench, their fingers finding simple melodies that gradually grew more complex. Emma's natural musical ability, inherited from her mother and dormant since Sarah's death, began to resurface like a flower pushing through concrete. As they played, Marcus told Emma more about Sophia, about her courage, her talent, and the opportunities that were opening up for her. He watched as Emma's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine engagement, particularly when he described how Sophia's voice had transformed an entire classroom. "Do you think I could meet her sometime?" Emma asked as she attempted to play a simple scale. "I'd like to hear her sing." I think that could be arranged, Marcus said, his heart swelling with hope. Perhaps Sophia's breakthrough was creating ripples that extended far beyond Lincoln Elementary's walls. The next morning, Marcus arrived at school early to find Sophia and her grandmother waiting nervously in the main office. Sophia wore her best dress, a simple white garment that Maria had pressed until it gleamed, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked simultaneously younger and older than her 8 years, a child preparing to step into an adult world of serious musical study. "Ready for today?" Marcus asked gently. Sophia nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "Mrs. Williams says, I just need to be myself and let my voice tell the story." "That's exactly right," Marcus confirmed. "You've already proven you can do that." Dr. Harper arrived promptly at 10 o'clock, a distinguished woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an aura of quiet authority. She spent a few minutes talking with Sophia about her musical background and interests before asking her to perform. Sophia had chosen 3 pieces for her audition: the Ave Maria that had first revealed her talent to her classmates, a traditional Mexican lullaby her grandmother had taught her, and a contemporary piece that Mrs. Williams had helped her learn. The variety would showcase both her technical ability and her emotional range. As Sophia began to sing, Marcus watched Dr. Harper's face carefully. The conservatory director's expression moved through several phases: polite attention, growing interest, and finally, undisguised amazement. By the time Sophia finished her 3rd piece, Dr. Harper was leaning forward in her chair, completely captivated. "Sophia," Dr. Harper said when the last note had faded, "in 30 years of working with young singers, I have rarely encountered such natural talent combined with emotional maturity. You have a very special gift." The formal acceptance into the conservatory program came 2 days later, along with details about the full scholarship, transportation assistance, and additional support services. Maria cried when Mrs. Williams translated the letter, overwhelmed by the opportunities suddenly available to her granddaughter. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came during lunch that same day, when Emma Chen, the popular girl who had first approached Sophia after her classroom performance, made an announcement to their entire table of friends. "Sophia's going to be famous someday," Emma Chen declared with the certainty that only children possess. "And we're going to say we knew her when she was just like us." Sophia blushed at the attention, but didn't shrink away from it as she once would. Instead, she smiled and said, "Maybe by then you'll all be famous for your own special things too." Marcus, cleaning nearby tables, heard the exchange and felt a deep satisfaction. Sophia wasn't just finding her voice. She was helping. Others believed they could find theirs as well. The ripple effects of courage, he realized, were often more powerful than the original act itself. That afternoon, as Marcus prepared to leave school, he encountered Madison in the hallway. She was alone, which was unusual. Typically she traveled with her entourage of followers. She seemed to be waiting for him. "Mr. Thompson," she said hesitantly, "can I ask you something?" Marcus stopped, curious about what the girl who had orchestrated Sophia's initial humiliation might want to discuss. "How did you know?" Madison asked. "About Sophia, I mean. How did you know she could really sing?" The question revealed more vulnerability than Madison probably intended. Marcus studied her face, seeing past the carefully constructed confidence to something more uncertain underneath. "Sometimes you have to look past what you expect to see," Marcus said gently. "Sophia was always special. She just needed someone to give her a chance to show it." Madison nodded slowly, processing this answer. I think maybe I was wrong about some things. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a beginning." Marcus watched as Madison walked away, her usual swagger replaced by something more thoughtful. "Change," he reflected, often started with the smallest. Admissions of possibility. 2 weeks after Sophia's acceptance into the Metropolitan Youth Conservatory, Marcus noticed something extraordinary happening at Lincoln Elementary. The girl who had once eaten lunch alone now found herself at the center of an ever-expanding circle of friendship and curiosity. But more than that, her transformation seemed to be awakening something in other students who had previously felt like outsiders. It started with Jeremy Walsh, a quiet boy from Mrs. Patterson's 4th grade class who had always been teased for his thick glasses and love of astronomy. Inspired by Sophia's courage, Jeremy had begun bringing his telescope to school and offering to show interested classmates the craters of the moon during recess. What had once been a source of mockery was becoming a source of wonder as children gathered around him, asking questions about planets and stars. Then there was Aaliyah Jackson, a 5th grader who had kept her poetry hidden in her locker for months, afraid that her classmates would find her verses silly or pretentious. After watching Sophia's triumphant moment, Aaliyah had approached the school newspaper with her poems. The first one had been published just that morning, earning her genuine compliments from students who had never noticed her before. Marcus observed these changes during his daily rounds, marveling at how one girl's brave moment had somehow given permission for others to emerge from their own shadows. Dr. Chen had noticed the pattern too, commenting to Marcus that the school's entire atmosphere seemed lighter, more inclusive. "It's remarkable," the principal had said during their brief conversation in the hallway that morning. "We've been working for years to address bullying and create a more welcoming environment. Sophia's example has accomplished more in 2 weeks than most of our formal programs managed in months. But perhaps the most significant change was happening much closer to home." Emma had been asking increasingly detailed questions about Sophia, and Marcus had finally arranged for the 2 girls to meet. The encounter was scheduled for that afternoon at the conservatory, where Sophia had her first official lesson. The Metropolitan Youth Conservatory occupied a beautiful historic building in downtown, its marble halls echoing with the sounds of young musicians practicing scales and arpeggios. Marcus felt slightly out of place among the well-dressed parents who typically populated such institutions, but Sophia's warm greeting immediately put him at ease. "Mr. Thompson," she called out as she emerged from her lesson room, her face glowing with excitement. "You came." "I wouldn't miss it," Marcus replied honestly, "and I brought someone who's been very eager to meet you." Emma stepped out from behind her father, suddenly shy despite her earlier enthusiasm. She had dressed carefully for the occasion, wearing her best sweater and the necklace her mother had given her for her 6th birthday. "You must be Emma," Sophia said with genuine warmth. "Your dad has told me so much about you. He says you're an artist." Emma nodded, clutching the small sketch pad she'd brought along. "I draw, mostly, but I used to play piano with my mom." The simple statement carried layers of meaning that Sophia immediately understood. Without being asked, she seemed to recognize the grief that Emma carried, the way loss could silence the things that once brought joy. "Would you like to hear what I'm learning?" Sophia asked gently. "Maybe we could play something together if there's a piano." Dr. Harper, who had been observing the interaction with interest, smiled and gestured toward one of the practice rooms. "There's a beautiful Steinway in Studio 3 that would be perfect for an impromptu performance." The practice room was elegant and intimate, with afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows and casting golden patterns on the polished wood floor. Sophia sat at the piano bench and began to play a simple melody, her voice weaving through the notes with effortless grace. Emma listened with rapt attention, her artistic eye taking in not just the sound, but the way Sophia's entire being transformed. When she sang, there was a freedom in Sophia's performance, a complete surrender to the music that Emma remembered feeling once, but had lost somewhere in the fog of grief. "That was beautiful," Emma whispered when Sophia finished. "I can see why. Everyone talks about your voice." "Thank you," Sophia replied. "But I think everyone has their own kind of music inside them. Some people sing, some people paint, some people write stories. The hard part is finding the courage to share it." Marcus watched his daughter process these words, seeing something shift in her expression. Emma pulled out her sketchpad and showed Sophia some of her drawings, the birds, the landscapes, the portraits she'd been creating in her quiet moments. Sophia studied each drawing with genuine appreciation, commenting on the details and asking questions about Emma's techniques. It'd been months since anyone had shown such interest in Emma's art, and Marcus could see his daughter beginning to bloom under the attention. "These are incredible," Sophia said, holding up a particularly detailed drawing of a cardinal perched on a snow-covered branch. "You capture emotions in the way you draw their eyes. This bird looks hopeful, like it's waiting for spring." Emma's cheeks flushed with pleasure. "That's exactly what I was trying to show. Most people just see a bird, but you understood." "Art is another kind of language," Sophia replied. "Just like music. We don't always need words to say important things." Dr. Harper, who had been quietly observing the interaction, stepped forward with an idea that would surprise them all. "Emma, have you ever considered combining your visual art with musical performance? We have several students here who work in multimedia presentations, combining live music with projected artwork or creating visual narratives that accompany musical pieces." The suggestion hung in the air like a bridge between two worlds. Emma looked uncertain, but intrigued, while Sophia immediately grasped the possibilities. "We could create something together," Sophia suggested excitedly. "I could sing while your drawings tell a story, like a picture book that comes alive." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion as he watched his daughter seriously consider the proposal. For the first time since Sarah's death, Emma seemed genuinely excited about a creative project. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Maria Martinez, who had come to collect Sophia after finishing her afternoon shift at the grocery store. She looked tired but happy, still adjusting to the reality that her granddaughter was now part of this prestigious institution. "Abuela," Sophia said, switching seamlessly to Spanish as she introduced Emma and explained their new friendship. Marcus was struck by how naturally Sophia moved between languages and cultures, a skill that would serve her well in the diverse world of professional music. Maria's weathered face broke into a warm smile as she listened to Sophia's animated description of their creative collaboration idea. Despite the language barrier, she seemed to understand the significance of what was happening. Her granddaughter was not just finding her voice, but helping others find theirs as well. As they prepared to leave the conservatory, Dr. Harper pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. "I wanted you to know that Sophia has made an extraordinary impression on our faculty. Her technical ability is remarkable for someone with no formal training, but it's her emotional intelligence that truly sets her apart." Marcus nodded, remembering Sophia's intuitive understanding of Emma's grief and her gentle way of encouraging his daughter to reconnect with her art. "But I also wanted to discuss something else," Dr. Harper continued. "We have a showcase performance in December where our most promising students perform for donors and supporters. I'd like Sophia to participate, but I want to make sure her family is prepared for the attention it might bring." The mention of attention made Marcus slightly nervous. Sophia's life had already changed dramatically in just a few weeks, and he worried about the pressure that might come with too much spotlight too soon. "What kind of attention are we talking about?" he asked. "Talent scouts, representatives from recording companies, scholarship committees from music schools. Sophia's voice is the kind that gets noticed, and word is already spreading in the classical music community about this young prodigy from Lincoln Elementary." Dr. Harper's words carried both promise and warning. Marcus thought about Sophia's grandmother, working her 2 jobs and struggling to understand this new world her granddaughter was entering. The opportunities were incredible, but they would also require navigation of systems and expectations that could be overwhelming. "I think Sophia can handle whatever comes her way," Marcus said finally, "but her grandmother might need some support understanding all the options and decisions." "Absolutely," Dr. Harper agreed. "We have counselors who specialize in helping families navigate the classical music world. No one should have to face these opportunities alone." The drive home gave Marcus time to process the afternoon's developments. Emma sat quietly beside him, but it was a different kind of silence than the withdrawn quiet he'd grown accustomed to. She was thinking, planning, imagining possibilities. "Dad," Emma said as they pulled into their apartment complex, "do you think Mom would have liked Sophia?" The question caught Marcus off guard, partly because Emma rarely spoke about her mother voluntarily, and partly because he knew the answer with absolute certainty. "Your mom would have loved Sophia," he said softly. "She always said that real talent came from the heart, not from fancy schools or expensive lessons. Sophia has exactly the kind of authentic gift that your mother spent her career trying to nurture." "In her students," Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I think Sophia is helping me remember things about Mom that I was afraid I'd forgotten. Like how she used to say that art was just love made visible." That evening, for the first time in months, Emma asked if she could practice piano. Marcus found himself sitting beside her on the bench, just as he had with Sophia's grandmother, watching his daughter's fingers rediscover melodies that had been sleeping in her muscle memory. The music was hesitant at first, interrupted by starts and stops, as Emma struggled to remember fingerings and chord progressions. But gradually, confidence returned, and with it, a glimpse of the joyful child she had been before grief had stolen her voice. As Emma played, Marcus thought about the unexpected ways that healing could arrive. He had hoped that helping Sophia might somehow ease his own family's pain, but he hadn't anticipated how directly and powerfully it would work. Sophia's courage hadn't just transformed her own life, it had created permission for others to reclaim parts of themselves they thought were lost forever. The next morning brought news that would accelerate everything. Mrs. Williams found Marcus. Before classes began, her face animated with barely contained excitement. "You're not going to believe this," she said, pulling him aside in the hallway. "I just got off the phone with Channel 7 News. They want to do a feature story about Sophia, about how a janitor's advocacy helped discover a young musical prodigy in an unlikely place." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Media attention was the last thing he'd wanted, especially attention that focused on his role in Sophia's story. He was just the janitor who had spoken up at the right moment, not someone who deserved recognition. "I told them I'd need to check with you and Sophia's family first," Mrs. Williams continued. "But Marcus, this could be huge for Sophia. National exposure, scholarship opportunities, professional connections." The conversation was interrupted by Sophia's arrival earlier than usual and practically glowing with excitement. She rushed over to them, clutching a folder full of papers. "Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Williams, you'll never guess what happened." She thrust the folder toward them, revealing official letterhead from the National Young Artist Competition. Marcus scanned the document quickly, his eyes widening as he processed what he was reading. "They want me to audition for the national finals," Sophia said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Dr. Harper submitted a recording of my audition, and they've invited me to compete against students from all over the country. The winner gets a full scholarship to any music school in America and a recording contract with Columbia Classical." Mrs. Williams grabbed Sophia's hands, both of them jumping slightly with excitement. "Sophia, this is incredible. This is the kind of opportunity that could launch your entire career." Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions wash over him. Pride in Sophia's achievement, excitement for her future, but also a growing awareness that they were all about to be swept up in something much larger than any of them had anticipated. The quiet girl who had once eaten lunch alone was about to become the center of national attention. And somehow, Marcus realized, his own simple act of speaking up in a classroom had set in motion a series of events that would change not just Sophia's life, but the lives of everyone around her. As Sophia continued chattering about audition requirements and competition details, Marcus caught sight of Madison walking past them in the hallway. For just a moment, their eyes met, and he saw something in her expression that he hadn't expected. Genuine happiness for Sophia's success. Perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all, Marcus thought, was still to come. The Channel 7 news crew arrived at Lincoln Elementary on a crisp Thursday morning in late November, their professional equipment and bright lights transforming the familiar hallways into something that felt more like a movie set than a school. Marcus watched from a distance as they set up their cameras, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the attention that was about to descend on Sophia and, inevitably, on himself. Reporter Jessica Chang was a polished woman in her 30s who had built her reputation on human interest stories that captured the public's imagination. She moved through the school with practiced efficiency, interviewing Dr. Chen, Mrs. Williams, and several of Sophia's classmates about the remarkable transformation they had witnessed. This is really a story about seeing potential where others might overlook it, Jessica explained to her cameraman as they prepared for the main interview. A custodian who recognized talent, a child who found her voice, and a community that learned to listen. Sophia seemed remarkably composed for someone about to be featured on television. She had dressed carefully in a simple navy dress that her grandmother had pressed to perfection, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun that made her look both younger and older than her 8 years. When Jessica asked about her journey from bullied outsider to celebrated prodigy, Sophia's answers were thoughtful and mature. "I was scared to let people hear me sing because I thought they would make fun of me like they did about other things," Sophia said, looking directly into the camera with surprising confidence. "But Mr. Thompson believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He showed me that sometimes you have to be brave, even when you're scared." The interview moved to Marcus. Next, though he had tried unsuccessfully to avoid being included in the story. Standing in his custodial uniform beside his cleaning cart, he looked distinctly uncomfortable under the bright television lights. "Mr. Thompson, what made you speak up for Sophia that day in the classroom?" Jessica asked. Marcus fidgeted with his work gloves, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. I couldn't stand watching her be set up for humiliation. Every kid deserves a chance to show what they can do without being made to feel ashamed of who they are. But you risked your position by interrupting a class. That took considerable courage." "Not really," Marcus replied quietly. "The courage was all Sophia's. I just opened a door. She's the one who walked through it." The most powerful moment came when Jessica asked Sophia to perform for the cameras. They had set up in the music room, where Sophia's journey had truly begun during those lunch periods with Mrs. Williams. As Sophia began to sing the same Ave Maria that had first silenced her classroom, the news crew found themselves experiencing the same phenomenon that had captivated her classmates weeks earlier. The camera operator, a veteran of hundreds of shoots, later admitted that he had struggled to keep his hands steady while filming. Jessica, known for her professional composure, found herself visibly moved by the performance. Even the sound technician, monitoring levels through his headphones, was seen wiping away tears. But it was the reaction of Sophia's classmates gathered to watch the filming that provided the most telling footage. These children, who had once mocked Sophia for her background and circumstances, now listened with expressions of genuine pride and admiration. Madison, who had agreed to be interviewed despite her complicated history with Sophia, surprised everyone with her comments. "I was wrong about Sophia," Madison said with unusual honesty for someone so young. "I judged her before I really knew her. Her voice is beautiful, but she's also just a good person. I wish I had been nicer to her from the beginning." The news segment aired 3 days later during the evening broadcast, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. The station's phone lines lit up with calls from viewers moved by Sophia's story. Social media exploded with shares and comments, many from people sharing their own experiences of being overlooked or underestimated. But the attention brought unexpected complications. By the next morning, Marcus found the school parking lot filled with news vans from competing stations, all hoping to get their own angle on the story. Sophia's grandmother, Maria, was overwhelmed by reporters approaching her at work and outside their apartment building. Dr. Chen called an emergency meeting with Marcus, Mrs. Williams, and Sophia's family to discuss managing the situation. The small conference room felt cramped with all the adults present, but Sophia herself seemed remarkably calm amid the chaos swirling around her. "The attention is wonderful for Sophia's career prospects," Dr. Chen acknowledged, "but we need to make sure she's protected from becoming overwhelmed. She's still an 8-year-old child who needs to focus on her education and development." Mrs. Williams had been fielding calls all morning from music industry professionals, talent agents, and recording executives. "The opportunities are incredible," she said, "but we need to be selective. Not every offer is going to be in Sophia's best interests." Maria Martinez listened to the English conversation with growing anxiety, catching perhaps half of what was being said. Sophia translated the key points for her grandmother, whose weathered face showed the strain of suddenly being thrust into a world she didn't understand. Marcus found himself in the unexpected position of advocate and advisor, his protective instincts, first awakened by Sophia's classroom humiliation, now extended to shielding her from an entirely different kind of pressure. "Maybe we should slow things down," Marcus suggested. "Let Sophia focus on the national competition first before making any major decisions about her future." It was solid advice, but events were already moving beyond their control. That afternoon brought a visit from Catherine Mills, a high-powered talent manager from New York who had flown to town specifically to meet Sophia after seeing the news coverage. Catherine was everything Marcus had expected from someone in her profession. Impeccably dressed, professionally confident, and armed with promises that sounded almost too good to be true. She outlined opportunities for recording contracts, performance tours, and endorsement deals that could set Sophia up financially for life. With proper management and the right exposure, Sophia could be the next Charlotte Church or Jackie Evancho. Catherine explained to the assembled group, "Child classical crossover artists are incredibly marketable right now," but it was her casual mention of relocating Sophia and her grandmother to New York that made Marcus's blood run cold. The idea of uprooting Sophia from the community and support system that had just begun to nurture her seemed premature at best, potentially damaging at worst. "Sophia needs stability right now," Marcus said firmly. "She's just beginning to find her place here. Moving her across the country seems like a huge disruption for someone so young." Catherine's smile remained professionally pleasant, but her tone sharpened slightly. "With respect, Mr. Thompson, you're a school custodian, not a music industry professional. These opportunities don't come along very often, and timing is everything in this business." The comment hit its intended mark, reminding Marcus of his place in the social hierarchy and his lack of credentials to offer opinions about Sophia's career. But before he could respond, Sophia herself spoke up. "I don't want to move to New York," she said quietly but firmly. "My friends are here. My school is here. Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Williams are here. Why can't I learn music and still live at home? Dr. Harper, who had been quietly observing the proceedings, finally weighed in with the voice of experience. There's no rule that says exceptional talent has to be developed in New York or Los Angeles. We have excellent resources right here, and Sophia is still very young. Rushing into major career decisions could actually be counterproductive. The meeting ended without any firm commitments, but the pressure was clearly mounting. Over the next week, more offers arrived daily, recording opportunities, performance bookings, even a potential appearance on a national television talent show. Meanwhile, Sophia's preparation for the National Young Artists Competition continued under Mrs. Williams's guidance. The competition would take place in Chicago in 3 weeks, with contestants ranging in age from 8 to 18. Sophia would be among the youngest participants, competing against students who had been training professionally for years. Pressure of the upcoming competition, combined with the constant media attention, began to take its toll. Marcus noticed that Sophia seemed more tired during school hours, and her usual cheerful demeanor occasionally gave way to signs of stress. That concerned him. It was during one of these difficult moments that Emma proved herself to be a true friend. Marcus had brought Emma to school with him on a Saturday morning to help with some light maintenance work, and they encountered Sophia in the music room, struggling through a particularly challenging piece for her competition audition. Sophia's frustration was evident as she repeatedly stumbled over a difficult passage, her usually perfect pitch wavering with exhaustion and nerves. When she saw Emma watching from the doorway, Sophia's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. "I can't do this," Sophia said, tears streaming down her face. "Everyone expects me to be perfect, but I'm just a kid. I don't know if I'm good. Enough for all of this." Emma approached Sophia without hesitation, offering the kind of comfort that only another child who had faced overwhelming expectations could provide. "My mom used to tell me that being perfect wasn't the point," Emma said softly. "She said the point was to share something beautiful with the world, even if it wasn't perfect." The two girls sat together at the piano, Emma's presence somehow calming Sophia's nerves. Without being asked, Emma began to play a simple accompaniment to Sophia's practice piece, her rusty piano skills returning under the pressure of helping her friend. Marcus watched this interaction with deep emotion, recognizing that his daughter was not just supporting Sophia, but reclaiming part of herself in the process. The collaborative art project they had discussed was happening naturally, spontaneously, born out of genuine friendship rather than adult orchestration. When Mrs. Williams arrived an hour later to find both girls working together, Sophia singing while Emma provided both musical accompaniment and visual sketches of the story the song told, she immediately understood that something special was happening. "This is it," Mrs. Williams whispered to Marcus. "This is what Sophia's performance should be for the competition, not just her voice, but this collaborative art that shows music as a bridge between people." The idea transformed Sophia's approach to the competition entirely. Instead of trying to prove herself as a solo performer, competing against older, more experienced students, she would present something unique. A multimedia performance that combined her voice with Emma's visual artistry and piano skills. Collaboration gave Sophia's preparation new energy and focus. Working with Emma felt natural and joyful, reminding her why she had fallen in love with music in the first place. The pressure of perfection was replaced by the pleasure of creation, of making something beautiful with a friend who understood both her dreams and her fears. As word spread about their collaborative approach, even the skeptics began to take notice. Catherine Mills called from New York, her dismissive tone replaced by genuine interest when Dr. Harper described the multimedia performance they were developing. A classical visual arts fusion by child prodigies. That's actually quite innovative, Catherine admitted. It could really set Sophia apart from the typical competition entries. But perhaps the most meaningful validation came from an unexpected source. Madison approached Sophia during lunch one day with an unusual request. "I know I haven't been very nice to you," Madison said, her usual confidence replaced by genuine nervousness. "But I was wondering, could you teach me to sing like you do? Not for competition or anything, just for me." The request represented a complete reversal of their original dynamic. Madison, who had once tried to humiliate Sophia through forced performance, was now asking to learn from her. Sophia's response revealed the grace and maturity that had impressed every adult who worked with her. "Music isn't something you do like someone else," Sophia said gently. "It's something you do like yourself, but I'd be happy to help you find your own voice." Over the following weeks, an unlikely friendship began to develop between the two girls. Madison's initial attempts at singing were tentative and self-conscious, but Sophia's patient encouragement gradually helped her find confidence in her own abilities. The transformation wasn't lost on the other students, who watched with fascination. As their social hierarchies continued to shift and evolve, Sophia's example hadn't just given permission for hidden talents to emerge. It had demonstrated that people could change, grow, and find new ways of relating to each other. As the date for the National Young Artist Competition approached, Marcus found himself reflecting on how completely their lives had changed in just a few months. Sophia had gone from isolated outsider to celebrated prodigy. Emma had rediscovered her connection to music and art, and he himself had learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply speak up for what's right. But he also knew that their biggest test was still ahead. In Chicago, Sophia would face the most challenging audition of her young life, performing not just for judges, but for an audience that would include talent scouts, recording executives, and media representatives from across the country. The stakes couldn't be higher, and Marcus found himself praying that the 8-year-old girl who had found her voice in an elementary school classroom would be able to hold on to it under the bright lights of national competition. The Amtrak train to Chicago pulled away from the platform on a gray December morning, carrying Sophia, her grandmother, Maria, Emma, Marcus, and Mrs. Williams toward what would either be the culmination of Sophia's dreams or a harsh lesson in the realities of professional competition. The 5-hour journey gave them time to rehearse, review their materials, and try to calm the nerves that had been building for weeks. Sophia sat by the window, watching the countryside blur past, while Emma worked on the final touches of the visual presentation they had developed together. Their collaborative piece had evolved into something remarkable, a storytelling performance that combined Sophia's voice with Emma's live sketching and painted backgrounds, creating a narrative about a young bird learning to fly despite the doubts of those around her. The metaphor wasn't lost on anyone in their small group. Sophia was indeed learning to fly, but the question remained whether she was ready for the altitude of national competition. Marcus had taken vacation time from his job to make the trip, using his modest savings to cover their hotel expenses. He watched Sophia practice her breathing exercises and noticed the slight tremor in her hands that betrayed her nervousness despite her outward composure. "How are you feeling, kiddo?" he asked, moving to sit beside her. "Scared," Sophia admitted honestly. "What if I forget the words? What if my voice cracks? What if everyone realizes I don't really belong here?" "You know what I think," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be, not because you're perfect, but because you're brave enough to try, Mrs." Williams overheard the conversation and joined them, her own nervousness evident despite her years of experience with student performances. Sophia, I've been teaching music for 20 years, and I've never worked with a student who has your combination of natural talent and emotional intelligence. Win or lose, you're going to give a performance that people will remember. The train pulled into Union Station in Chicago just after noon, and the bustling energy of the city immediately surrounded them. Sophia had never been anywhere larger than their small hometown, and the towering buildings and crowds of people were both exciting and overwhelming. Their hotel was modest but comfortable, and Sophia and Emma shared a room while the adults had separate accommodations nearby. That evening, they attended the mandatory orientation session for competition participants, held in the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel. The other young performers were an impressive and intimidating group. There was Chen Wei, a 14-year-old violinist from San Francisco, whose technical precision was already legendary in youth classical circles. Isabella Rodriguez, a 16-year-old soprano from Miami, had been performing professionally since age 12 and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to standing ovations. Most of the other participants had teams of coaches, agents, and family members surrounding them. Their equipment was professional grade, their performance attire clearly expensive, and their casual conversations referenced masterclasses with world-renowned instructors and performances at prestigious venues. Sophia felt increasingly out of place among these polished young professionals. Her simple black dress, purchased specifically for the competition, suddenly seemed inadequate compared to the elaborate gowns and tailored suits worn by her competitors. Emma sensed her friend's growing anxiety and squeezed Sophia's hand reassuringly. Remember what you told Madison about finding your own voice instead of trying to sound like someone else. That's what makes you special. You're not trying to be like them. The competition format was announced during the orientation. Each participant would have exactly 10 minutes to perform, with points awarded for technical skill, artistic interpretation, stage presence, and originality. The youngest participants would perform first, which meant Sophia would take the stage. Early in the morning session, that night, Sophia barely slept. She lay in the hotel bed listening to Emma's steady breathing and running through her performance in her mind, trying to calm the butterflies that seemed to be holding a convention in her stomach. Marcus couldn't sleep either. He stood at his hotel room window, looking out at the Chicago skyline and thinking about how far they had all come from that moment in Mrs. Henderson's classroom. Whatever happened tomorrow, he knew that Sophia had already accomplished something remarkable simply by getting to this point. The competition venue was the prestigious Millennium Park Music Center, a beautiful concert hall with perfect acoustics and seating for 800. As participants arrived for their final rehearsals, the atmosphere was electric, with nervous energy and barely contained ambition. Sophia and Emma ran through their multimedia presentation one final time, with Emma positioned at an easel beside the piano where she could create live sketches while Sophia performed. The technical crew had been initially skeptical of their unusual setup, but during the sound check, even the hardened professionals found themselves drawn into the stories Sophia was telling. The performance piece they had created told the tale of a small songbird who lived in a forest where all the other birds had golden feathers and trained voices. The little bird's feathers were plain brown, and her song was different from the classical melodies the others performed. When a great storm threatened the forest, however, it was the little bird's unique voice that guided everyone to safety, proving that difference could be a strength rather than a weakness. As Sophia sang the opening verses, Emma began sketching the forest scene on large sheets of paper, her quick strokes bringing the story to life visually. The combination of Sophia's pure voice, Emma's flowing artwork, and the narrative structure they had created together was unlike anything the competition had seen before. "That's quite something," said Judge Patricia Kovach, a renowned opera singer, who served on the panel. I've never seen that kind of collaborative storytelling in a youth competition. The morning of the competition dawned clear and cold. Sophia woke early and spent time in prayer with her grandmother, drawing strength from Maria's quiet faith and unwavering support. Despite not understanding all the complexities of the music world her granddaughter was entering, Maria's belief in Sophia never wavered. "Sing from your heart, mija," Maria said softly in Spanish. "Everything else will follow." The waiting area backstage was filled with nervous energy as young performers prepared for their moments in the spotlight. Some were running through vocal exercises, others sat in meditation, and a few were making last-minute adjustments to their instruments or costumes. Sophia found herself in conversation with Michael Jang, a 12-year-old pianist from Seattle, who was competing in the instrumental category. Unlike some of the other participants, Michael was friendly and encouraging rather than competitive. "I saw your rehearsal yesterday," he said. "The way you and your friend work together is really cool. It made me think about music differently." It was exactly the kind of reaction Sophia had hoped for. Not just admiration for technical skill, but recognition of the emotional connection that music could create between people. When Sophia's name was called, she walked onto the stage with Emma beside her, their equipment already set up from the earlier rehearsal. The audience of judges, parents, and music industry professionals fell silent as the two girls took their positions. For a moment that felt like an eternity, Sophia stood in the spotlight, acutely aware of every eye in the auditorium focused on her. She could see Marcus in the audience, his face tight with nervous anticipation. Mrs. Williams sat beside him, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Then Sophia caught sight of her grandmother in the front row, Maria's weathered face shining with pride and love. In that moment, all the pressure and expectations fell away, replaced by the simple desire to share something beautiful with people who had believed in her. Sophia began to sing, her voice clear and strong despite her nerves. As the story of the little brown bird unfolded, Emma's sketches brought each scene to life, creating a visual narrative that enhanced rather than distracted from Sophia's performance. The judges leaned forward in their seats, clearly engaged by the unique presentation. In the audience, several people were visibly moved by the story being told. The tale of finding strength in difference, of courage in the face of doubt, of the power of authentic expression over polished perfection. As Sophia reached the climactic moment when the little bird's song saves the forest, her voice soared through the concert hall with a power and emotion that transcended her years. Emma's final sketch showed the brown bird, surrounded by all the golden birds, no longer an outsider, but a celebrated member of the community. The performance ended with Sophia's voice echoing through the hall, followed by a moment of profound silence. Then the applause began, not polite appreciation, but genuine enthusiasm from an audience that recognized they had witnessed something special. Judge William Harrison, a composer and music educator with 40 years of experience, was the first to speak during the evaluation session that followed each performance. What we just witnessed was remarkable not just for the technical skill displayed, but for the artistic vision and emotional maturity, he said. This young lady has created something truly original while demonstrating exceptional vocal ability. Judge Kovacs nodded in agreement. The collaborative element added layers of meaning that elevated the entire performance. This wasn't just singing, it was storytelling at its finest. The third judge, Dr. Sarah Kim, had been taking notes throughout the performance. The voice is extraordinary, pure, powerful, and emotionally expressive. But what impressed me most was the confidence and stage presence. This performer commanded the room from the first note to the last. As Sophia and Emma left the stage, they were met backstage by Marcus and Mrs. Williams, both of whom looked overwhelmed with pride and emotion. "That was incredible," Mrs. Williams whispered, embracing both girls. "You created something magical up there." Marcus knelt down to Sophia's level, his voice thick with emotion. "I am so proud of you, not just for how beautifully you performed, but for staying true to who you are, even in the biggest moment of your life." The competition continued throughout the day, with each subsequent performance adding to the high standard that had been set. Chen Wei's violin performance was technically flawless, demonstrating years of rigorous training. Isabella Rodriguez delivered a powerful operatic aria that showcased her mature vocal development and professional stage experience. But as the day progressed, it became clear that Sophia's performance had left a lasting impression. Other participants approached her during breaks to complement the creativity of her presentation. Parents and teachers in the audience made a point of introducing themselves, many expressing interest in following Sophia's future career development. Catherine Mills, the New York talent manager who had been pressuring Sophia's family for months, was notably present in the audience. After the performance, she approached Marcus with a considerably more respectful tone than she had used in their previous meetings. "I owe you an apology," Catherine said directly. "Your advice about keeping Sophia grounded and developing her artistry gradually was absolutely correct. What we saw today was far more impressive than any rushed commercial project could have been." The results wouldn't be announced until the evening awards ceremony, giving everyone several hours to explore Chicago and try to relax after the intensity of the competition. Sophia seemed remarkably calm, as if the act of performing had released the tension she'd been carrying for weeks. "How do you feel?" Emma asked as they walked along the lakefront, the December wind whipping off Lake Michigan. "Proud," Sophia said simply. "Whatever happens with the judging, I know we did something beautiful together. That feels more important than winning." It was a remarkably mature perspective for someone so young, and it spoke to the growth Sophia had experienced over the past few months. She had learned that success wasn't just about being the best, but about being authentic, collaborative, and willing to take creative risks. As evening approached and they prepared to return to the venue for the awards ceremony, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. Regardless of the competition results, he knew that Sophia had already won something more valuable than any prize: the confidence to be herself in a world that often demanded conformity. The awards ceremony would determine Sophia's official standing in the competition, but her real victory had already been achieved in the hearts and minds of everyone who had witnessed her performance. The awards ceremony began at 7 o'clock that evening in the same concert hall where the day's performances had taken place. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation as participants, families, and industry professionals filled the elegant venue. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the assembled crowd, and the stage was decorated with arrangements of white roses and gold ribbons. Sophia sat between Emma and her grandmother in the third row, her hands folded calmly in her lap despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Around them, other families showed varying degrees of nervous energy, some parents gripping their programs tightly, others whispering encouragement to their young performers. Marcus found himself studying Sophia's composed demeanor with admiration. Whatever the outcome, she had already demonstrated a maturity and grace that impressed everyone who encountered her. The frightened girl, who had once hidden in the back of Mrs. Henderson's classroom, had been replaced by a confident young artist who understood her own worth. The ceremony began with remarks from Dr. Amanda Foster, the competition's artistic director, who spoke about the exceptional quality of that year's participants. "In my 15 years of organizing this competition, I have rarely seen such a diverse range of talent and creativity," she announced to warm applause. Awards were presented, in reverse order, beginning with honorable mentions and working up to the grand prize. Each category recognition brought its own moment of triumph or disappointment, with winners rushing to the stage amid cheers from their supporters, while others maintained dignified smiles despite their disappointment. Chen Wei, the technically proficient violinist from San Francisco, received second place in the instrumental category, a significant achievement that was met with enthusiastic applause. Isabella Rodriguez earned first place in the classical vocal category, her operatic training and professional experience finally paying off with official recognition. And now, Dr. Foster announced, we come to our most prestigious award, the Grand Prize for Overall Excellence, which recognizes not just technical skill, but artistic innovation, emotional impact, and the potential for continued growth in the classical arts. The hall fell silent, except for the rustle of programs and the subtle sounds of hundreds of people holding their breath simultaneously. Sophia felt Emma's hand slip into hers, providing silent support regardless of what was about to happen. This year's grand prize winner demonstrated something truly extraordinary: the ability to create a completely original, artistic experience while maintaining the highest standards of classical performance. The judges were unanimous in their decision. Dr. Foster paused, her eyes scanning the audience with the practiced timing of someone accustomed to building dramatic tension. The grand prize winner of this year's National Young Artists Competition is Sophia Martinez of Lincoln Elementary School for her innovative multimedia performance, Finding Your Voice. The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment before their meaning fully registered. Then the concert hall erupted in applause, as Sophia sat frozen in her seat, unable to process what she had just heard. Emma was the first to react, jumping up and embracing her friend with tears of joy streaming down her face. Maria Martinez began, crying and speaking rapidly in Spanish, her words a mixture of prayers of thanksgiving and expressions of overwhelming pride. Marcus felt his own eyes fill with tears as he watched Sophia slowly stand and make her way to the stage. Still seeming somewhat dazed by the turn of events, Mrs. Williams, seated nearby, was applauding so enthusiastically that several other audience members turned to smile at her obvious emotional investment in Sophia's success. As Sophia reached the stage, Dr. Foster embraced her warmly before presenting the award, a beautiful crystal sculpture that caught the stage lights and threw tiny rainbows across the backdrop. "Sophia, would you like to say a few words?" Dr. Foster asked, adjusting the microphone to accommodate Sophia's height. Sophia looked out at the audience, her eyes finding the faces of the people who had made this moment possible. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the hall, with the same confidence she had demonstrated during her performance. "I want to thank everyone who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," she began, her words simple but heartfelt. "My grandmother, who taught me that music comes from the heart, Mrs. Williams, who showed me how to use my voice, Emma, who helped me tell my story, and Mr. Thompson, who saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself." She paused, looking directly at Marcus, whose face was now openly streaked with tears. "A few months ago, I was afraid to let anyone hear me sing because I thought I didn't belong. But I learned that everyone belongs when they have the courage to share their gift. Thank you for helping me find mine." The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes, with several audience members visibly moved by Sophia's gracious acceptance speech. As she left the stage, Sophia was immediately surrounded by congratulatory well-wishers, including several of her fellow competitors who had been genuinely impressed by her performance and touched by her humility. The reception that followed the ceremony was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, where industry professionals mingled with families and participants. Sophia found herself at the center of numerous conversations with people eager to discuss her future prospects and artistic development. Dr. Harper from the Metropolitan Youth Conservatory beamed with pride as she introduced Sophia to colleagues from other prestigious institutions. "This young lady is going to change the classical music world," she predicted to anyone who would listen. But perhaps the most meaningful interaction came when Isabella Rodriguez, the 16-year-old who had won the classical vocal category, approached Sophia with genuine warmth and respect. "Your performance was incredible," Isabella said. "I've been trained in classical technique for years, but you have something that can't be taught. You have soul. That story you told through your music, it made me remember why I fell in love with singing in the first place." The comment represented a profound shift in how Sophia was perceived by her peers. She was no longer the outsider trying to prove she belonged, but an artist whose unique voice had earned respect from even the most accomplished young performers in the country. Catherine Mills approached Marcus later in the evening, her earlier, a pushiness replaced by genuine respect and careful consideration. "I hope you'll consider working with our agency," she said, "but on your terms, not ours. Sophia's artistic development should be gradual and thoughtful, exactly as you've been advocating. We'd be honored to help facilitate opportunities that align with her values and goals." It was exactly the kind of respectful partnership Marcus had hoped for, one that would support Sophia's growth without overwhelming her or compromising the authentic voice that had made her special in the first place. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Rebecca Chen, a documentary filmmaker who had been in the audience and was fascinated by Sophia's story. "I'd love to explore the possibility of creating a feature-length documentary about Sophia's journey," Rebecca explained. "Not just her musical development, but the broader story of how communities can nurture talent and how individual courage can inspire collective change." The idea intrigued Marcus, particularly Rebecca's emphasis on the community aspect of Sophia's story. This wasn't just about one talented child, but about how recognition and support could transform not just individual lives, but entire school cultures. As the evening wound down, Sophia found herself exhausted but exhilarated. The Crystal Award seemed almost too beautiful to touch, catching the ballroom's light and creating small sparkles on the tablecloth where she had carefully placed it. "How does it feel to be a national champion?" Emma asked, as they finally prepared to return to their hotel rooms. "Surreal," Sophia admitted, "like something that happened to someone else, but also right somehow. Like maybe this is what I was supposed to be doing all along." The next morning brought a flurry of media attention as word of Sophia's victory spread beyond the classical music community. The story of the custodian who recognized talent and the immigrant child who rose from bullying to national recognition captured the public imagination in a way that surprised everyone involved. Phone calls poured in from television shows, newspapers and magazines, all wanting to feature Sophia's story. Dr. Chen fielded dozens of interview requests while trying to protect Sophia from becoming overwhelmed by the attention. But the most significant call came from the White House. Sophia had been invited to perform at the annual Children's Arts Festival, an honor typically reserved for the most established young artists in the country. It's unprecedented for a competition winner to receive this kind of immediate recognition, Dr. Foster explained during a conference call with Sophia's family and support team. "But your performance has resonated far beyond the classical music world. The invitation represented the kind of opportunity that could launch Sophia's career into the stratosphere, but Marcus remained cautious about the pace of her development. We need to make sure Sophia has time to process what's already happened before we add more pressure," he said during a family meeting to discuss the various opportunities being presented. Sophia herself seemed remarkably clear about her priorities. "I want to accept the White House invitation," she said, but I also want to go home and see my friends at school. I want to keep working with Mrs. Williams and Emma. I don't want success to mean I have to leave behind the people who helped me. Get here." It was exactly the kind of grounded perspective that had impressed judges and industry professionals throughout the competition weekend. Sophia understood that her talent was a gift to be shared, not a commodity to be exploited. The train ride. Home was subdued compared to their anxious journey to Chicago. Sophia dozed against the window while Emma worked on a sketch of the awards ceremony, trying to capture the moment when Sophia's name was announced. Marcus found himself planning how to help Sophia navigate the opportunities ahead while protecting the childhood and community connections that had shaped her. Mrs. Williams spent the journey making lists of practical considerations. How to balance increased performance opportunities with Sophia's regular education, how to maintain her connection to the conservatory program, how to ensure that rapid success didn't compromise her artistic development. As familiar landscapes began appearing outside the train windows, Sophia stirred from her nap and looked around at her traveling companions. "I know everything is going to change now," she said quietly, "but I hope some things can stay the same too." Marcus understood exactly what she meant. Sophia's life would indeed change dramatically as a result of her competition victory, but the values and relationships that had made her success possible needed to be preserved and protected. When they arrived at the train station, they were greeted by a crowd of friends and supporters from Lincoln Elementary. Dr. Chen was there, along with several teachers and dozens of students who had followed Sophia's journey from the beginning. Most surprisingly, Madison was among the welcoming committee, holding a handmade sign that read, "Welcome home, Sophia." The girl who had once tried to humiliate Sophia was now genuinely celebrating her success, representing the kind of personal transformation that Sophia's courage had inspired throughout their school community. As Sophia stepped off the train, Crystal, a ward carefully cradled in her arms, she was surrounded by the community that had supported her journey from frightened outsider to national champion. The little girl who had once been afraid to let anyone hear her voice had found not just her own strength, but had helped others discover theirs as well. The real work of managing success was just beginning, but Sophia faced it with the same courage and authenticity that had carried her from Mrs. Henderson's classroom to the nation's most prestigious young artist competition. She had learned that finding your voice wasn't just about singing. It was about having the courage to be yourself in a world that often demanded conformity. And as Marcus watched Sophia embrace her friends and teachers, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the support of a community that had learned to recognize and nurture the extraordinary potential that exists in every child, waiting for someone brave enough to help it emerge. 6 months after Sophia's triumph at the National Young Artists Competition, Lincoln Elementary School had become an entirely different place. The transformation wasn't just in the hallways decorated with newspaper clippings about Sophia's achievements, or in the new music equipment donated by inspired community members. The real change was in the atmosphere itself, a palpable sense that extraordinary things could happen to ordinary people when someone took the time to truly see them. Marcus arrived at work each morning to find a school buzzing with creative energy. The art program had expanded dramatically, with Emma Thompson Chen serving as a student mentor to younger children learning to express themselves through visual arts. The astronomy club that Jeremy Walsh had started now boasted 15 members, and their own telescope, purchased through fundraising efforts that Sophia had helped launch. Most remarkably, Aaliyah Jackson's poetry had been published in a national children's literary magazine, earning her recognition that extended far beyond Lincoln Elementary's walls. The ripple effects of Sophia's courage continued to expand, inspiring students throughout the district to pursue their own hidden talents. But perhaps the most profound change was in Madison Crawford, who had undergone such a complete transformation that many people could barely recognize the girl who had once orchestrated Sophia's classroom humiliation. Madison had discovered her own gift for music composition, creating original pieces that Sophia often performed during her continuing appearances and performances. Their collaboration had become the subject of considerable attention from child psychologists and educators interested in how former adversaries could become creative partners. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a researcher from the State University, had written a case study about their relationship that was being used in anti-bullying programs across the country. What we see in Madison and Sophia's friendship is proof that children are capable of remarkable growth when they're given the opportunity to move beyond their initial reactions to difference, Dr. Walsh explained during a conference presentation that Marcus attended. Their partnership demonstrates that empathy and understanding can be learned and practiced even after significant conflict. The success of Sophia's story had indeed attracted national attention, but not in the way Marcus had initially feared. Rather than exploiting Sophia's talent for commercial gain, the media coverage had focused on the broader lessons about recognizing potential, supporting young artists, and the power of community investment in children's dreams. Rebecca Chen's documentary, titled Finding Voice, A Story of Courage and Community, had premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and was now being distributed to schools and community organizations across the country. The film didn't just chronicle Sophia's musical journey, but examined how Marcus's simple act of speaking up had catalyzed changes throughout an entire school system. The documentary had won several awards, including the Special Jury Prize for Social Impact, and had been instrumental in launching a national foundation dedicated to identifying and nurturing artistic talent in underserved communities. Marcus found himself serving on the foundation's advisory board, his custodial experience providing valuable insights into recognizing overlooked potential. Sophia herself had navigated the challenges of increased recognition with remarkable wisdom. She continued her studies at Lincoln Elementary while participating in the conservatory program, maintaining the balance between normal childhood experiences and serious artistic development that Marcus had insisted upon from the beginning. Her performance at the White House Children's Arts Festival had been a defining moment, not just for Sophia, but for everyone who had supported her journey. Standing in the East Room, surrounded by the nation's most accomplished young artists, Sophia had performed her signature piece about the little brown bird, but with new verses that Emma had helped her write. The additional lyrics spoke about how the brown bird's song had inspired other forest creatures to find their own unique voices, creating a symphony of difference that was more beautiful than any single perfect melody. It was a direct reflection of what had happened at Lincoln Elementary, where Sophia's courage had given permission for an entire community of children to embrace their authentic selves. President Martinez, who had been in attendance, had been visibly moved by the performance and had spent several minutes speaking with Sophia afterward about the importance of using one's gifts to lift up others. "You've learned something that many adults never discover," the president had told Sophia. "True success isn't about outshining others, but about helping everyone shine brighter together." The White House performance had led to other opportunities, carefully selected by the team of advisors that Marcus had assembled to protect Sophia's interests. She had performed with several regional orchestras, recorded an album of traditional lullabies from various cultures, and had been featured in a children's television special about young artists making a difference in their communities. But Sophia's favorite performances remained the intimate concerts she gave at Lincoln Elementary, often collaborating with Emma on multimedia presentations that combined music, visual art, and storytelling. These school performances had become monthly events that drew audiences from throughout the district, but they maintained the authentic, community-centered spirit that had made Sophia's initial breakthrough so powerful. Marcus often reflected on how much his own life had changed alongside Sophia's transformation. The foundation work had led to opportunities in arts education advocacy, and he had been offered positions with significantly higher salaries and more prestigious titles. However, he had chosen to remain at Lincoln Elementary, believing that his most important work was still happening in the school's hallways and classrooms. His relationship with Emma had deepened as well. His daughter had not only rediscovered her love of music and art, but had found her calling as a mentor and teacher to younger students. She had started a peer tutoring program that paired older students with younger ones based on shared interests, rather than academic ability, creating connections that might not have formed otherwise. "I think Mum would be proud of what we've built here," Emma had told Marcus recently, as they walked through the school's expanded art wing, which now featured student work from every grade level. Marcus knew she was right. Sarah would have loved seeing how Sophia's story had sparked a broader recognition of the artistic potential that existed in every child, waiting for the right moment and the right support to emerge. The most recent development had been the establishment of the Sophia Martinez Scholarship Fund, designed to provide opportunities for young artists from backgrounds similar to Sophia's own. The fund would pay for private lessons, summer camps, and competition entry fees for children whose families couldn't afford such investments in their artistic development. Sophia had insisted on being actively involved in the scholarship selection process, reviewing applications and even conducting video interviews with potential recipients. Her questions were always thoughtful and revealing, focusing not just on technical ability, but on the applicant's passion for their art form and their commitment to using their talents to help others. "I remember what it felt like to think I wasn't good enough," Sophia explained to Marcus during one of their selection committee meetings. "I want to make sure these kids know that someone believes in them, even when they don't believe in themselves yet." The first scholarship recipients had just been announced, including a 10-year-old dancer from Detroit whose family had immigrated from Somalia, a 12-year-old painter from rural Mississippi whose work showed extraordinary promise, and a 14-year-old spoken word artist from Oakland whose poetry addressed social justice themes with remarkable maturity. Each scholarship recipient would receive not just financial support, but mentorship from established artists and ongoing guidance from the Foundation's educational team. It was exactly the kind of comprehensive support system that Sophia had benefited from, scaled up to help dozens of other young artists each year. As Marcus reflected on the 18 months that had passed since Sophia's first classroom performance, he was struck by how many lives had been touched by that single moment of courage. The scholarship recipients, the students at Lincoln Elementary who had found their own voices, the educators who had implemented new programs based on Sophia's story. The ripple effect seemed to expand endlessly. Even Madison's transformation had inspired her own family to make significant changes. Her parents, who had once been focused primarily on social status and competitive achievement, had become advocates for inclusive education and generous supporters of arts programming in schools throughout their district. Sophia taught Madison that being mean to people different from you doesn't make you better, Madison's mother had explained during a parent interview for Rebecca Chen's documentary. It just makes you smaller. Now Madison wants to help other kids avoid making the same mistakes she did. The annual Lincoln Elementary Talent Show had become a district-wide event, with Sophia serving as both performer and host. But rather than creating a hierarchy of winners and losers, the show celebrated every participant's courage to share their gifts with the community. Children performed everything from traditional classical pieces to original rap songs, from contemporary dance to magic tricks. Sophia's role was not to judge, but to encourage, offering supportive comments and genuine enthusiasm for each performer's unique contribution. The event had become so popular that it was now broadcast live on local television, with donations collected to support arts programming in schools throughout the region. The success of the talent show had inspired similar events in other districts, creating a movement that emphasized participation and encouragement over competition and exclusion. Educational researchers were studying these programs as models for how schools could foster creativity and self-confidence while building stronger communities. As spring arrived at Lincoln Elementary, Marcus found himself preparing for another significant transition. Sophia would be graduating from elementary school in just a few months, moving on to middle school while continuing her conservatory training. The prospect of her leaving Lincoln Elementary was bittersweet for everyone who had been part of her journey, but Sophia had already made it clear that she intended to maintain her connection to the school that had given her the foundation for everything that followed. She had proposed creating a summer music camp at Lincoln Elementary, where she could work with Mrs. Williams to provide intensive arts instruction to students from throughout the district. "This is where I learned that my voice mattered," Sophia had explained to the school board when proposing the program. "I want to make sure other kids have the same opportunity to discover what they're capable of." The school board had approved the program unanimously, with several members commenting that Sophia's continued commitment to her original community demonstrated the values and character that had made her success so meaningful. Dr. Chen, now in his final year before retirement, had often said that Sophia's story would be the defining achievement of his administrative career. "In 30 years of education, I've never seen a single student's journey create such positive change for an entire school community," he had told the local newspaper. Sophia didn't just find her voice. She helped all of us remember why we chose to work with children in the first place. As Marcus finished his evening cleaning routine on a warm May evening, he paused in the music room where Sophia's journey had truly begun. The space had been renovated and expanded, with new instruments and recording equipment that allowed students to create professional quality recordings of their performances. On the wall hung a plaque commemorating Sophia's achievements. But more importantly, it featured photos of all the students who had participated in various arts programs over the past year. The display was a visual reminder that Sophia's story was ultimately about more than individual success. It was about creating systems and communities that could recognize and nurture the potential that existed in every child. Emma found him there, having stayed after her own tutoring session to work on preparations for the upcoming talent show. "Thinking about how far we've all come?" she asked, joining her father in looking at the photo display. "Thinking about how much further we can still go," Marcus replied. "Sophia showed us what's possible when someone takes a chance on a child who seems different or overlooked. Now we need to make sure that lesson doesn't get forgotten." Emma nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Sophia's story had become a catalyst for broader change, but sustaining that change would require ongoing commitment from everyone who had been touched by her example. As they prepared to leave the building, Marcus took one last look at the music room. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, new students who needed someone to believe in their potential, new chances to create the kind of communities where every child could find their voice. Sophia Martinez had started as a frightened little girl eating lunch alone, dismissed and bullied by classmates who couldn't see past their own prejudices. But through courage, community support, and the simple act of one person speaking up at the right moment, she had become not just a celebrated young artist, but a symbol of hope for anyone who had ever felt overlooked or undervalued. Her voice had indeed left rooms silent, but more importantly, it had inspired countless others to find the courage to use their own voices, creating a symphony of difference that was more beautiful than any single perfect performance could ever be. And in the end, that was the greatest achievement of all. Not just discovering one extraordinary talent, but creating a world where every child's potential could be recognized, nurtured, and celebrated. The story of Sophia Martinez and Marcus Thompson would continue to inspire new generations of students, educators, and communities, proving that sometimes the most powerful changes begin with the simplest acts of courage and compassion. In a world that often seemed divided by difference, their journey demonstrated that authentic connection and mutual support could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities, one voice at a time. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.